Hi there, my name is Steven. I've recently bought a 1994 Bluebird TC2000 bus. It was extremely slow, and I decided to change the transmission in the bus. It had an Allison AT545 4-speed non-locking transmission, and I decided to swap it to an Allison 1000/2000 6-speed transmission. And I had a lot of struggles, and I documented a lot of it, so here it is. Enjoy. I just want to kind of tell the story of how I got here and what my issues were, and hopefully it'll help any of you that decide to do this swap on your own. I bought a used Allison transmission off of Craigslist, and it came out of a 2006 box truck, and so I assumed that it was the 6-speed. It had an SAE2 bell housing, and if you know anything about these Allison AT545s and the 5.9 Cummins adapter in the buses, they use the SAE3 bell housing. So I bought a bell housing off of eBay. I think it was like 150, 170 bucks, something like that, for this transmission, and I thought all was well. I bought a computer and harness and the whole electronic kit from CA Conversions, and I bought it for an 06 Allison, which would be a 6-speed. So I put everything in, installed it. I couldn't get it to do anything. The computer would command third gear, which I could find through my scan tool, and I believe third gear is usually limp mode, and it threw some different codes here and there. I would try to command gear 1 with the scan tool, and I wouldn't do it. It was just stuck in third. So I started digging a little bit more, and I found the plate on the side of the transmission, and I figured out how to read the dates, and I saw that the build date was an 04, which would make it a 5-speed, not a 6-speed. So I called Dave at CA Conversions and talked to him a while about what my options are. Basically, I needed a 6-speed transmission to work with this harness because of the gear ratios, and the computer is completely different for the two different models. So I did some more digging, and I found a Reman 6-speed transmission. Had a torque converter, also had the SAE2 bell housing, which I swapped with my SAE3. In my conversation with Dave from CA Conversions, I discovered that he could look up a serial number for me, and could tell me what the transmission was, so he could tell me if it would work with his harness. So I double checked my serial number for my 5-speed. They said, yeah, it's the wrong transmission, it's the 5-speed. So that way I could know for sure that that's what the issue was, which felt good because up to that point I didn't know what the deal was, and at least now I knew I just had the wrong transmission. So I found another used one, and before I bought it, I cross-referenced with CA Conversions, made sure that it was the correct transmission. And this is my advice for you if you're doing this. If you're not buying the transmission from CA Conversions, have them check your serial number to make sure that the transmission will work with the harness that they're making for you. And that would have saved me a lot of time of installing the wrong transmission and a lot of headache and trying to figure out what the issue is. So I did double check that. The reason that it was for sale is because the rear plug where the harness plugs into the transmission was broke. So I knew I had to replace the internal harness on the inside the pan, which isn't a big deal. It's pretty easy to do that. So here are the two different harnesses. They're the exact same thing except for the main rear plug that sticks out of the transmission. On the left is the Allison plug, and on the right is the General Motors plug. I accidentally bought the Allison plug, but I needed the General Motors plug to fit with the harness that CA Conversions sent me. So this was my harness mix-up. Got it figured out, and TransStar was great to work with. After I finally got the correct harness, I got it all plugged in. Everything seems to work fine. The manual mode is really handy. If you're going downhill especially, you can select your gear and it won't go over that, so you could shift down to 4th and it will just hold the bus, which is really nice. A big difference from the 545 where it's just you and the air brakes, and if something goes wrong with that, you are not doing so good when you get to the bottom of the hill. Seems to shift well, and I really like it. Through all this headache and process, I was starting to regret my decision of changing the transmission, since my AT545 still worked fine. But I am very glad now that I've drove these 1,300 miles and pulled a vehicle behind the bus. I'm really glad that I have the 6-speed. It's just faster. The cruising speed by RPMs dropped way down, and it's more efficient. I can actually go more than 55 miles an hour if I want to. So that is definitely a plus. Now that story time is over with, please keep watching to see how I did it. The first thing I did today is I took this drive shaft loose from the back of the transmission. And on this bus, it was a 6mm Allen wrench that I used to get that loose. It was a little bit of a pain, but it wasn't too bad. And in order to pull it back, I had to take the carrier bearing loose here. You can see I just kind of tacked it back up. The next thing I'm going to do is take out these two bolts right here, and that's just a cap on the bell housing. So if you take this off, you can get to the torque converter bolts and loosen those up. All right, I got that plate off. These are two 10mm bolts here. So now you can see in there and see the torque converter. That's a bolt that you see right there. So now you have to spin the crank until you get to all these bolts. I got a 10mm socket there on these bolts in the front. So when I turn the crank, I'm actually looking there. I can see where the bolts are. So there you can see the bolt right in the center. I got it in the center. That is a 15mm bolt, and I'm not sure how many there are, but I'll just keep spinning until there are no more. So every time I spin the crank, I get it right in the center, then I take that loose. Then I spin it again and do the same thing until the torque converter is loose. All right, I am sitting on the ground behind the transmission. You're gonna have to take that loose, this hose, and then that right there, you can see that joint. I used a 7/8 wrench, and they actually came loose pretty easy. So now I am ready for those bell housing bolts. I'll get those two up there at the top first, and then just work my way around. And right there, that's the oil dipstick that goes up inside the bus. Right here. So you're going to have to take that loose. So I will kind of explain a little bit. The transmission's out now, so I won't be filming any of that, obviously, but I'll kind of explain how I got it out, and then I'll show you how I'm putting the new one in, and how the best way that I found to do that. And I think it'll make sense, and I think you'll understand what I'm trying to do. It's a tiny bit sketchy, and it's better to do with two guys. But it can be done, and I'll show you what I'm doing, and you can let me know if I'm an idiot, because I may be, actually. This is the adapter that came off of the torque converter from the AT545, so you're going to want to put this back on. So this will go on to the torque converter, just like this, and it needs to be down to 46 or 47, but for sure. Okay, I am sitting back behind where the transmission is normally mounted, and because I have a flat nose bus, the axle is right here, and there's pretty much no way to, without like a lift of some sort, to drop the transmission down here and scoot it out the side, or not that I found. And so what I actually did was, see these blocks right there and right there. I've got a couple 3-ton jacks there that I jack up the front of the bus as high as I can until it almost picks up these wheels, and then that gives me enough clearance Actually, you don't need to jack them up. You can just slide it back and set it on top of this axle. And then I put a jack stand underneath this steering rod, I think it is. And then I actually just slide it off of my transmission mount jack, onto this axle. Move the jack back here where I'm at, and then slide it onto the jack, and then lower it down as much as possible, and then take it outside. One thing, this is a mounting bracket right here for let's see, it's this U-shape. It's just kind of like a protector for the drive shaft. The drive shaft goes right through it. You won't have to jack it near as high if you just take this bracket off, but I didn't feel like it, so I just jacked it up as high as I could, and that gave me enough clearance here to get past this. So that's basically what I'm going to do in reverse order. Got the transmission sitting out here. Put the torque converter and the adapter and everything on, because if you try to do it once it's in here, it is hard. It's hard, that's all I'll say. So I'm going to try to do it with everything attached. I got it sitting up there on the axle, most of the way just on the axle because of the torque converter and everything in the front. Sorry about the heater noise, by the way, but just thought I'd show you where I'm at. So far it's going pretty well. I'm going pretty slow, and I pretty much got it stabbed. I still got to line everything up. Right here is where I put my dipstick. That goes up. Had to bend it a little bit, modify it a little bit, but it fits in. And I've discovered it's good to do that before you get the transmission in, just so that you can for sure get it up in, and it can be a little difficult. I got everything fastened down good and tight on the transmission, and I ran my wiring, and I may take it back out again because I don't like where I mounted the computer, but we'll see. So this main wiring here will run back to this big plug in the back of the transmission. Now I don't have my internal harness installed yet, which I'm going to do that, drop the pin and do that from the bottom. This will plug into that, and then I've got this plug right here, and then there's this one right here, and then one up with the bill housing. So there's 4 plugs, it's pretty straightforward. So then the neutral safety switch is going to mount right here, and this will plug into the back of it, and then you have to wire that into this plug right here that comes, you'll find out on the AT545, and you wire that into your neutral safety. That way the bus will actually start when you're neutral. If you don't wire that up, or at least in my case, it wouldn't start. Yeah, just finished tightening my torque converter bolts. I'm going to shut that cap right there, and now I'm going to do this one right here. So you have to open this one up so you can spin the torque converter to get it to line up with your first bolt. Otherwise you don't have really any way to control that. So now I'm going to put this plate back on. Make sure that this is pointed up in the neutral position. It's just going to go on, kind of something like that. It may need to be adjusted later, and there's some play here on both sides. this might not be the best way, so I'm just going to see if this works. If it does, great. If not, I may have to try something different. All right, here's the knuckle from the AT545, something like that. That slid in pretty satisfying. Put the bolt in. Right here is where I mounted the throttle position sensor, so that the transmission knows where the throttle is at and when it should shift. So then I just ran my wiring right over here. That's pretty simple. And I wanted it up here where it's pretty accessible so that I can easily adjust it. So I did end up rerouting my wiring. Earlier I had the ECM and the control module in the inside, but the cord was just barely long enough. So I moved them out here in the front. Right here is where I put the shift selector. And I really don't like what I did here. My dash is pretty much falling apart now that I've been inside of it, and almost none of my gauges work. The fuel gauge works and the air pressure gauge works. Since I've been inside, most of the other gauges have stopped working, so I would recommend putting the shift selector somewhere over here in this steel, and it would be, you could never go into your dash here, and that would be just as good of a spot. And I think you could also do a cleaner job than what I did with my plastic. That looks not nice. So and then my indicating gauge is right back here. I haven't mounted that yet. I haven't found a good place for it. That's my story of changing the Allison AT545 to an Allison 1000 6-speed transmission. It took a long time and I was under a time crunch, so that's why I skipped a lot of the shots. But let me know if you enjoyed it, let me know if it helped you, and let me know if you have questions. Thank you. Peace.